All right, what's going on? We're back. We're here with Maurice Crandall, Mo Crandall, to those who have met him, probably.
Mhm.
Very interesting person in this whole world. So great to have you on.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for those that don't know, Mo, it's like, what do? You teach, you write, you skate, you do a lot of things. What do you get into?
My day job is as a history professor. So I teach history at Arizona State University in Tempe. Um, I don't live in Tempe. I live in like the next little suburb over, which is called Awatuki, which has kind of a goofy name. But Phoenix is like one of these big spread out valleys. So a lot of people live in like scattered parts of the valley. A lot of sprawl. I mean, we're like the quintessential desert sprawl community, which is awful because it's not sustainable, and yet we're in like the least sustainable environment in the United States. But I do that. I teach history courses here. I write and research. My area of specialty is Native American history and regionally in the American West. So broadly speaking, like Arizona, New Mexico, but also Mexico as well. So I've done research and worked in northern Mexico. And I skate. I got family, kids, wife, mortgage, the whole nine, and just kind of like in a lot of ways live a pretty normy life. I would say like I try to kind of keep with what's current in skating, but probably don't succeed very well. Like I'm not like on Thrasher watching every new post or anything like that. A lot of videos just you know slip through the cracks. Like I don't know. I don't have the time to like pay attention to skating maybe in the way that a lot of people do, but I try as much as I can.
Yeah, I mean, you're in it, and before we started recording, you told me that you skated this morning, so that's better than a lot of people out
I
there
do.
who
Yeah,
have
yeah.
commitments, job,
That's
family, all
true.
that.
I
So
mean, I
you're in
probably
it.
don't consume. Yeah, I don't consume as much skate media as I do actually skate. I probably skate like 4 or 5 times a week, as much as I can.
That's so much better than a lot of us. So congratulations. So like a couple different worlds. That's rad. Like, do you tell people in academia that you're involved in skateboarding at all?
Um, I mean, I don't lead with that, but it certainly comes up from time to time. Like I mean, on I have an Instagram, and my Instagram is basically just skate clips. Like I don't do academic posts or work related posts on there. So if and my Instagram is private too. But if it's like somebody, a colleague, and they request me or somehow we get following each other, then like it'll become pretty clear that I skate. And so it comes up that way. Like it's come up a few times funny, like if I've taken a slam and I'm like limping down the hallway where one of my colleagues will be like, "Are you okay? What happened?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, I fell skateboarding." And they're like, what? And you can see the wheels spinning, like skateboarding, like isn't that kid stuff? I don't know. Like so it comes up occasionally. Um, by now, I bet probably the majority of my colleagues know that I skateboard, but it's not some like if it comes up, it comes up. It's cool. I don't try to hide it or anything. Like I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. And it's like different people have different strategies. I have friends and I've been at this spot in my life too where I'm working like a really, in kind of an uptight environment, and I maybe don't talk about it that much for a reason, but you're working around with some of the same people, and I think that,
Right.
at least tell me what your reality is like, but it seems like more and more, especially now, maybe less so 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but like there are a fair amount of academics who skate.
Yeah, yeah. Even at ASU, there's a handful of people that skateboard, and I've skated with a guy that's like there's a dude in the art department, Mark, who's a sculptor and like a super good skater, originally from Canada. There's this guy, Alan Gomez, who's been involved with Slow Impact as well, and he's a skater. And There are several others. There's actually, it's funny when somebody finds out that I skate, sometimes they'll ask me, do you know such and such professor in this other department? And a lot of times I don't know them. So there are more than we realize. I think there are more skaters at my institution and just like in general in academia.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like some of that is just the world changing too. I mean, I feel like I've brought this up on most episodes of this podcast that I've done, but I just think of back in the day, Jason Lee retiring from pro skating because he turned 25 and he was like, "Well, who skates after 25? It's not a thing that you do." And it's like
Yeah, totally.
now
Yeah,
in this era, most people I know who skate are over 30, and that's just like kind of how the world is. It's changed a lot. So
right.
this thing of like, oh,
Right,
you
right, right. Yeah,
outgrow
for
it, it's
sure.
kid stuff or something. That was the attitude for quite a while, and now it's so different.
Sure. Agreed.
Yeah, so I get that. So when it comes back to, what you're doing professionally, you're teaching history, you're writing, and there's a real focus on, like you're talking about, native culture. I suppose depending on where you are, people say First Nations, people say Indigenous, people say
Hmm.
Native American,
Right.
a lot of
Yeah.
different terms. So I want to make sure I get the terminology on point. But in general, what for
They
those
all
who don't,
work.
they all work great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
But like for those who don't know about you and your connections and your work, where does that focus come from?
Um, so I mean, like, how do I give this like a quick history lesson or kind of civics lesson as it relates to the
Sure,
United
sure.
States? So the U.S. has several hundred federally recognized Native American tribal nations, and each one, and this was established through Supreme Court decisions in the 19th century and treaties that were made uh, preceding even the establishment of the United States, where different colonial nations made treaties with different tribal nations. And then the U.S. continued that tradition, and there has been a recognition of tribes as nations. Within the United States, the terminology for Native nations is that they're considered domestic dependent nations. So uh, they're within the territorial boundaries of the United States. They possess a degree of sovereignty and rights to self governance and land, but that's always subordinated to the federal government. And so it's a complicated relationship, and we could talk for a long time on that. But anyway, Native nations are nations in the sense that like we have our own governments. We have tribal governments and often they're modeled after the U.S. form of government. So we have three branches. So like in my tribe, we have an executive branch, which is the president, and or we don't have a president. I shouldn't say that. We have a chair. So we have a chair and a vice chair, and then we have a legislative branch, which is our tribal council, and they make the tribal laws and decisions like that a legislature would within a state or a nation. And then we have a judicial branch, so we have a tribal court that tries cases, and we have our own tribal police department. We have various economic developments. Our government takes care of functions that like a state government would. Like we have a housing program. We construct houses. We have economic assistance programs for our tribal members. We do a lot of the things that a state or a nation would do. And another thing that tribes do is they determine who is and who is not a citizen of that nation. And so you have to meet certain criteria, and each tribe will have variations on what the criteria are. Um, and this is a whole other issue that we could discuss, but most tribes base their tribal citizenship on blood quantum. So you have to possess like a certain degree of Indian blood, is what they call it. So so you get this card that's called a CDIB, a certificate degree of Indian blood, and it tells
Okay.
like the the fraction of Native American you are. Um, and those can go all the way from 4 down to like one whatever 1/16, 1/32,
Huh, okay.
like the amount diminishes depending on like whether your parents or your grandparents married somebody who was not Native American. And so like the amount will diminish depending on that relationship. And so It's totally bizarro. It's not a concept that we would have traditionally used within our communities. You know, like nobody was going around saying like, "What proportion Yavapai Apache
Right.
are you?" That's my tribe. So, you know, are you three quarters? Are you you know, like that? That's not a thing historically. It was something that the U.S. government um, made us adopt
I
in
was gonna
order
say
to
it sounds
yeah.
very like social pyramid ish, um, but
It
like
is, yeah.
yeah,
It's not good, and we kind of joke around and say like the only in the United States, the only groups that are determined by blood purity are Native Americans, horses, and dogs. You know, like you look at a dog pedigree. I mean, that's essentially what this is. Like Native people in the
right.
United States and many tribes have a pedigree, which is bizarre. But then some tribes don't do that. They do it by if you're a descendant of tribal members, then that's how you receive your tribal citizenship through like lineal descent. But in our tribe, we have a blood quantum requirement.
And that's also interesting. And thanks for spelling all that out. You know, I really wanted to get into the why you study and teach and write about
Yeah,
that whole world, but you're speaking already to your personal experience. You're a member of the tribe, so it comes from there. Was this
yeah.
like maybe it's a super basic question, but did you always know that this is what you wanted to do? Were you, raised around
Yeah,
people in your tribe who are saying you should
right.
do this, this is important, or did that, come later?
Sure. No, that's a good question. I mean, I was raised around people, we would say elders. So I was raised around grandparents and aunties and uncles and people who talked about the old days. You know, like my grandfather was born in what we would call a wickiup, like a wood brush shelter
Yeah,
along the
wow.
river, you know, with a dirt floor and no electricity. So I grew up hearing those types of stories um, about kind of life in the early 20th century in my grandparents' lifetime, and then even before that. So because most Native American cultures are orally based, they're oral cultures. A lot of the things that we know them because they're handed down through storytelling. And so you learn from your older relatives who learned from their ancestors and et cetera, et cetera. And so that chain goes
Yeah,
back to a time that we can't even remember when. We would say time immemorial. People would say, like, well, when did these stories originate? And unless they're about a specific person and their specific experience, if they're traditional stories, we don't know. It was a time before time. Like they come from time immemorial is the term that we use. And so I grew up hearing those kinds of stories, both traditional stories that like non-native people would call them like myths or like creation stories. Like I
right,
learned those stories, which are traditional that deal with like our origins as a people, like where we come from. And these stories often have elements of like human animal interaction, where like there was a time we believe when animals and people communicated, and like there's those types of stories. And then like I grew up hearing specific experiences, stories from my relatives about their lives and about growing up and about certain places and events and things like that. um, and I would say, to speak more directly to your question, was this what I always wanted to do? Maybe not necessarily like in as many words, but I always was the person that was interested. Like if me and my
huh?
cousins were all at my grandparents' house, I was the one that was listening to my grandparents talking about this kind of stuff. And they might sit around for a while, but then they wanted to go do something else. Like I was like hanging on to every word. And so um yeah, I guess in that sense, like I've always been interested in stories, being a storyteller. Um, being a keeper of that kind of knowledge, because when you hear that stuff, if you don't internalize it and then like continue telling it, those stories can die. um and so for me it's been important to sort of like be a repository of that kind of knowledge and then pass it on. So I teach it to my kids, I teach it to other relatives. If they don't know these things, I take them to places that uh, are connected to like specific, both events in our traditional stories or more recent events, specific things that have happened there. Like I think it's important to learn at the place. Place-based knowledge is what we call it. So that all
Yeah.
kind of answers your question.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I was just gonna say it takes a certain type of young person to be interested in what the older people are saying, for as
Oh, of course.
obvious
Yeah,
as it
yeah,
is
yeah.
as an adult, when you're, 12 years old, 11 years old, do you really want to listen to, old people tell stories? A lot of kids don't. So that right there is a
Yep.
tell that maybe that there was something there. There was something there to latch on to. So
Sure.
that makes all the sense in the world. So, as you're growing up, you're hearing these stories, you're getting interested. When does skateboarding come into your life?
Oh God. I mean, I was born in the late 70s, so I'm a kid of the 80s, and like a lot of people, as corny as this sounds, like uh probably like one of the big things was seeing Back to the Future. Like you
Of
and you'll
course.
hear a lot of skaters of my generation talk
Yeah.
about like how Back to the Future was like a big deal. And I remember going to the theater with my cousin and my siblings. We were in Phoenix and we went to the movie theater here in town and saw Back to the Future. And I remember just like seeing him on a skateboard, thinking like, "Wow, that looks sick." And then I could totally remember he doesn't like Michael J. Fox, his character, like Marty McFly, doesn't do any skateboard tricks, but he does like he snaps his tail and pops up his board and catches it. There's
Right.
like a few times when he does that in the movie, but it's funny because he like snaps the tail and he catches it like mall grab style. He doesn't catch the wood, he catches the truck. And so I remember like practicing that, like trying to practice like snapping my board to a mall grab. Um, so that was kind of like the start, like I got my first skateboard. It was a an action sport kamikaze, which is like a supermarket board. Um,
Of course.
super crappy, like the wheels don't roll, they're way too soft. It's like it's not an actual usable board, but it's enough to like if you keep with it to get you interested. And then, like a lot of kids, I had the experience of like getting a Christmas complete, like the first skateboard. I got a Powell Peralta Per Wellender street
There we
board
go. There we go.
with Tracker 6 tracks and rat bones and like shredded grip pattern, like ripped grip on the top. And it, you know, um, and those were funny days. Like we would in those days too, in the 80s, like you could go to the supermarket and there would be like a movie rental section, um, like a
Yeah,
really
okay.
small rental section. And you could rent like Search for Animal Chin or Public Domain, or like there were a handful of skate videos that you could rent, like 80s videos. And a lot of skaters, again, my age can remember that like, they have like, Vision, that have like, or Savannah Slamma, they've got like a handful of just, 4 or 5 videos. And I remember renting those and seeing skateboarding through those early videos and stuff. So like more or less I've been skating on and off since then, not continuously. There have been times where a few years pass where I don't skate much or, for whatever reason don't have the time or the opportunity or I'm doing something else. But I've had the skate bug since the like mid 80s basically.
That's so cool. And yeah, when skating was in a different place, it's, so ubiquitous now, especially with social media, but those little experiences where you could grab it somewhere out in public, you're at the grocery store and they have like 3 skate videos or something. For me, it was
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah, yeah.
the local drugstore. I have no idea why, but the local drugstore where I grew up like had Skateboarder magazine. So we just grabbed one there. I was like,
Huh.
whoa, what is this? They just had it. And those are all gateways to this other world. So that's so cool.
Yeah,
Especially
for
in that
sure.
era too, when things were advancing
Totally.
and changing so much and there was this like kind of fever pitch, it seems like around skating. And you got
Yeah.
the bug then and now we're here. So that's so cool. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I mean, I was gonna say like I've lived through most of the eras and was like in some way part of all of them. And like I mean, when I really got into skating and actually started learning tricks was like full blown big pants, small wheels era.
yeah, okay. Okay.
I had the 39 millimeter wheels. I had the gigantic, New Deal, big deal jeans with the huge t-shirt, like bob shirt tee. I mean, I was like, we were all full blown early 90s kids. And That time gets a lot of hate, but it was sick if you were around then, especially because there would be like three skaters in your whole town, and you were such a crew and like stuck together, and like we're I don't know, you're like protective of skateboarding as a thing. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
I wasn't around for that era, but looking at it from the outside, I can see how one, yeah, it was a low point in a lot of ways for popularity, but also everything was kind of changing. A lot was moving
Hmm.
and a lot was innovating, and you can look back at it now as kind of weird or like an awkward teenage phase almost, but that's where growth comes from.
Yeah,
That's where change comes from. If you think about how quickly things progressed, like 1988 to 1993 is 5 years, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Everything changed.
it was
Everything
wild.
changed. Like, there it's not recognized by 1993, nothing from '88 is recognizable. You can't really compare any other era. If you go back to 2021 from now, what was skating like? It was, basically the same. So, a few things changed, but not much.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah,
No,
and
skating changed dramatically in those years.
yeah, and it's like what we have now is, not that different from what we had in, I don't know, things kind of leveled off by like 95, 96. It's all, again, things have changed, but not as much as they did in those
R-
few years. So really cool time to be around. What,
right. Yeah,
okay,
sure.
so you're doing these things, you're skating, you're growing up skating, and you're in high school, I presume because you're, writing, teaching, doing all this stuff at a university level that, you continue your education at some point, but like what was that like finishing high school and skating? Were you straight to college right away, or were you doing other things?
Yeah, I mean, I so I mean, my parents were pretty big on education, so I had like a push from family to go to college and do the college thing. But skateboarding was big too, and so I was interested in that. Let's just say college took me a long time to finish. Um, I just, like it wasn't just a straight through kind of university, undergrad to grad school to career, etc. Um, I had times there where I was kind of like doing other things, working jobs, having kind of different experiences. And I also lived rurally, so like rural central Arizona is kind of a different world. Skating in a rural place is definitely a different experience than skating in like a city that has spots and that has kind of a skate culture. Like we didn't have that. We sort of had like one school that had some red curbs, and then my junior year in high school, our high school let us have like a little spot on the campus where there was like half a tennis court open, and so we like with some help from a few of the teachers built a quarter pipe and like half a pyramid, and then there were a couple of grind bars and stuff so that we could skate a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, I worked at Walmart for a while, and then I worked for my tribe. We have a casino, so I worked at our casino, which was like an interesting job. And being like 19 years old and working at a casino, making pretty good money because part of my job was like I was called mobile cage, which is like if casinos, there's like the cage is where you get the
Oh yeah, I don't know this
uh
terminology.
yeah.
The cage is where you like
Okay,
trade in your
so
chips, is that it?
exactly, exactly. But when
Okay.
I worked there, there weren't club cards, so you had to actually put like money into the machines.
Sure, okay.
And so if people needed change, they didn't want to put a whole 50 into the machine. They'd come to me, and I had this little cart that had like a bag of cash, and I would unlock it and then like break their money for them. Um, and then if a machine hit a jackpot, like we all had sections of the floor that we were assigned to, and our casino was not big. It was like a small area. So that at any
Sure.
given time, there's like three or four of us covering the whole floor. But if a machine hits a jackpot in those days when it's all cash, like it's going to spit out all of its quarters or whatever
Sure.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
run
yeah.
out of money. And so if you won $1,000, it's only got like 200 bucks in coin in it. So the light on top would flash. And my job was to go to the main cage, get the rest of the jackpot, and then bring it to the person. So I would do that. And then, like the security's watching you. They're like accompanying you, the guys with the little, like single AirPod in their ear and sunglasses, whatever. And then you'd pay out the rest of the money and count it off. And like, uh, it's customary when you win a jackpot, somebody gives you a tip. So if you
Sure.
just paid out a stack of 50s or whatever, you might get a $50 tip. And if you I worked full time there, so if it's like an 8-hour shift, you might have like 3 jackpots. So you could leave the place with 100, $150 in tips in your pocket
Yeah.
as an
Not
18-year
bad.
old living in the middle of nowhere. And we didn't tip share either. There was no pooling, and so you kept whatever you made. So
Wow.
there were
Okay.
some nights where I was like super lucky where I left with a couple $100. So like I had a new skateboard whenever I wanted one. I had a car. I was like pretty set for like a small town kid in the middle of Arizona.
Yeah, for sure. And
Um,
and you stayed in this small town. Presumably you grew up there. Was that like where your tribe was located too? In that area?
yeah, yeah. So my tribe is in central Arizona in the what's called the Verde Valley. It's named after the Verde River. So our reservations, we have several like non-contiguous pieces of reservation, and none
Got
of
it.
them are really big. They're all relatively small plots, but they're within that Verde Valley area, and that's where I'm from. Um, I mean, I didn't stay there forever. Like eventually, I left and moved to New Mexico. Like long story short, I got married. My
Yeah.
wife and I moved to New Mexico because she had a job there with the Forest Service, and that was when I decided to go to graduate school. So I went to the University of New Mexico, got a master's degree in history, and then a PhD in history. And all that time, I was also working in special ed in the public schools there.
Oh
So I was
wow.
a
Okay.
special ed assistant in classes, working full time doing that for several years. And then we had kids as well. So along the way, having kids, understandably, I wasn't skating as much during that time just because it was super busy.
You're doing a lot. You're
But I was
doing
also playing,
yeah.
yeah, and I was also playing in bands. Like in my 20s and 30s, I played in bands. I played drums, so I was playing in like rock bands,
I don't
fairly seriously. I would say
get
like semi-professionally,
how
like
you're doing
playing
all
pretty
this, but you're
regular
doing
gigs
it.
and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and I wasn't taking any drugs or anything like that. I was just kind of like somehow somehow doing it all. I don't know. Not sleeping enough, maybe.
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be part of it. If you just can run on no sleep, you can do a lot. So kids,
Yeah,
teaching,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure.
going to school, bands, man, wow, okay, okay. So you're doing all this. What you finished school, I get that, like what made you lock in on you know, living the academic life, getting a PhD and stuff. I know that, you obviously had a
Right.
history and had an interest in your tribe and Native American studies in general, but was there one thing or like a series of events that made you really consider that as a career path?
Um, I had I had sort of planned to teach maybe like high school history, be a public school teacher. And at a certain point, um, my grandfather took me aside and he said, like our tribe, one of the benefits of our casino is that we have a higher education scholarship program, so it'll help pay for your college education. And my grandfather took me aside and he said, you should go to school as long as you can. Um, the tribe will help you pay for it, so get as much education as you can. If that means getting advanced degrees, going all the way as far as you can, even to get a PhD. Nobody in my family has ever had a PhD. Nobody in my tribe up to that point had gotten a PhD either. Um, and so I just decided, okay, I'll go all the way. And I wasn't. It's academia is a hard career. Most
Yeah.
people who get PhDs and maybe like think of academia as a viable career choice. It's not really. There are so few jobs, and this speaks to like universities are they have a vested interest in churning out as many graduates as they can, and so
Right.
they, especially with like advanced degrees, they confer more advanced degrees than there are jobs. That's just the reality. And so I wasn't set and thinking like, oh, I'm going to be an academic. Like I know that I'm guaranteed to get a job and I'm going to go through this whole process. But I went through with sort of like my eyes open, but also being realistic that it might turn out some other way, and I wouldn't necessarily be a college professor. And for the first couple years, actually, right as I was finishing my PhD and immediately after, I worked at a museum and cultural center that was owned by the Pueblo tribes in
Okay.
New Mexico. There's 19 of them in New Mexico. That's where I was living, going to graduate school, and they owned their own cultural center and archive and library and museum. And they hired me there to do historian work. So I worked there for the first while after getting my PhD, and right before they hired me before I had finished. And then I got a postdoc. I applied to some postdocs and I got one. And then I was like, okay, well, let's try that. So we moved to Texas for a year so I could have a postdoc. And then we said, all right, I'll apply to academic jobs now and we'll see if we get any bites.
Yeah.
And as we say, like the rest is history. I got a job. My first job was in the East. I worked at Dartmouth in New Hampshire for 5 years. Uh, and then decided that I wanted to move back west to be closer to my tribe, to be closer to the work that I do. It's hard to, like work and study and be embedded in a community if you live, uh, 30-hour drive away or a series of flights away. It just was really hard to do that work. I mean, I did it, but it wasn't how I wanted to be, and I wanted to be closer to my community. And so we came to ASU, which is about an hour and a half south of my community. So I'm
Got
up there
it.
pretty often. I mean, I was up there Saturday. I gave a talk to a gathering of, it was a cultural gathering that was organized by a woman who's a tribal member, and she's has done a series of events. So I'm there pretty frequently. I try to contribute and be involved as much as I can.
Got it. I mean, yeah, so much information there. Thanks for spelling it out. The really cool that your tribe had a program where they helped pay for school too. I remember the first I heard of that, I had my freshman year roommate in college had a similar deal where it was like he was a member of a tribe and they helped him pay for school. And I remember
Yeah,
talking a lot about that. Like it's a really cool thing to be able to take advantage of, especially if you
totally.
get multiple degrees. That's amazing. So very cool that that existed. Also, I just think about like, well, one, did you ever do the drive from New Hampshire to Arizona? Like drive all the way because
I
that's a long
did.
drive.
Yeah. Every
That's so
year we
cool.
did it. It's like 32 hours. One time we did it all the way through. Like we didn't stop. We drove straight through and just alternated driving. We just wanted to get there as quick as we could, so we did that.
That's
And
serious. Okay.
that was a haul. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you say 30-hour drive, 32-hour drive from experience. So we get that. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 for sure. For sure. We
Yeah.
did it. We
Yeah,
did drive
right.
several
Um
times.
and yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Like you're all the way out there. What was it like? I mean, hey, you'd lived in the Southwest your entire life before that, right? Moving to New Hampshire, like was
Yeah.
that, kind of a jarring experience?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we lived in Vermont because Dartmouth is in Hanover, New Hampshire, which is like
Yep, yep.
the Connecticut River is the boundary between Vermont and New Hampshire, and so you can live on either side and work there. So we chose the Vermont side because it was kind of like more our style. Um, so we lived in Vermont for 5 years while I worked in New Hampshire, like just across the river. And like, yeah, it was a culture shock for sure. For one thing, the weather, like if you've never experienced like a true New England, and Vermont, New Hampshire are like, northern New England is different than, southern New England
Oh
or
yeah.
like New York City or whatever. It's like a different beast of cold. Um, yeah, and I remember that first winter, it was like -20. There was a cold snap there where it got to -20. Like if you've only lived in the desert your whole life, like you can't even like there's I don't even understand how that happens. You know, I remember
I
like
was gonna
breathing in and
say,
feeling my nose hairs freeze. You know, they like froze solid inside my nostril. It was so cold. It was insane. Yeah.
yeah, it's real. I'm sure an experience to be able to have. But
Yeah, yeah.
when you were teaching in New Hampshire, you were teaching at Dartmouth, you were still teaching presumably about, the subject matter that we've been talking about, Native
Yeah.
American culture studies. You were still focused on the Southwest, tribes in the Southwest, stuff like that?
I was. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the classes that I taught were more general Native American history. And but then some of the other courses that I taught were like more specialized and regionally specific to like the US Southwest or the border region between US and Mexico. Um, but I mean, that's what you when you teach and you have a specialty, you need to adapt it to courses so that it can be relevant or interesting to people, or you approach it from like a comparative way so that somebody who isn't from that region can understand it because they can observe similar trends in the place that they're from. That's the hope. And they hired me knowing that I'm from the Southwest, that's my geographic focus and the area that my expertise is in, and they were fine with that. I mean, it wasn't ever a problem because they had other people who were, like there was a colleague of mine who was a Canadian Indigenous First Nations tribal member, and so he taught about more, like Canadian First Nations, Indigenous politics, and then I had another colleague who was from like Great Lakes. He was from Sault Ste. Marie. He was a tribal member from Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan, and so we kind of cover geographically both the United States and internationally. Like we had scholars who focused on international indigenous issues who had specialty in like New Zealand and
Sure.
Maori people, for example. So we kind
Also
of did it all.
important to distinguish Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, because the city exists on the Canadian side as well. For those who don't know, so it's a
Right,
weird,
right. Yep.
it's a weird
Yeah.
international city in that regard. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally. Totally. Yep.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, maybe it's a big question, and maybe it could take up 6 episodes. But I just have the general question where it's like, when you're teaching these classes, you have an audience of people who are presumably interested in the subject matter. What what
Uh huh.
do people, when it comes to Native American culture, or current events or politics or whatever, what do people get wrong? What do you think people should know that they don't know? And like, intentionally big question.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Gosh, like you said, we could take a lot of time going over that. I think so like one of the first things that I hear a lot of, or I get asked by a lot of people is, um, there's a misconception that Native Americans in the United States get some sort of government payout on the regular.
Okay.
That doesn't happen. There are people who say like, doesn't the government, meaning like the federal government, doesn't it just pay for everything for Native Americans? um, there's no such thing as some sort of regular government check that I get from the federal government. That doesn't happen. Um, the federal government, through its treaty obligations and through agreements that it made with Native nations over the centuries, really, has agreed to provide certain services. So to put it the simplest way is like, in exchange for all the land we stole from you and the wrongs that we did to your people, we agree to provide health care, for example, or
Okay.
some form of health care. So there's what's called the Indian Health Service, which is a federally run health service. It's a federal bureaucracy, but that might sound good. The actual quality of care is not very good. IHS facilities are underfunded, understaffed. They're often in rural locations where the quality of care isn't very high. And so, like growing up, I went to the Indian hospital. When I needed to get health care, we went to an Indian hospital, and you wait in a waiting room forever. You might see a sort of resident attending doctor who is just there doing their residency. They don't have, like steady staffing that's there long term. Um, but that's one of the services that ostensibly is provided by the federal government. There's Indian Health. There's also Indian Education. So the federal government sometimes runs schools on reservations, like for reservations that are extremely remote, where there isn't a public school district nearby. The Bureau of Indian Education might run the school on that reservation and provide education to Native American young people. Um,
There's
but
also
but the
to interrupt.
idea that
Yeah, to interrupt. There's also
yeah,
Division of Indian Work, and I know about that because there was one next to the old Third Layer Skate Park in Minneapolis.
right, yeah. I mean, there are work programs, and So, so those are things that are done through longstanding agreement with tribal nations that the federal government will provide, um, at least on paper, that they're going to provide things like healthcare, education, job training, etc. But again, the quality varies widely, and you could it's really hit or miss. And I don't think that anybody who grew up, going to the Indian hospital would say like, "Oh yeah, that's great healthcare."
Huh. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
that's the ideal right there. It's just that's not the reality. Um,
Does some of that
and even with
perception,
education,
yeah, does some of that perception of like getting funds from the federal government or something come from a misunderstanding of like the profit sharing that tribes that have casinos or certain businesses do? Again, just like framing from my own experience where I grew up, we
right?
weren't far from a casino, a native run casino that I know that tribe did like in some sort of profit sharing program, and there were, if you went
Yeah,
down by the casino, there are
right, right.
a lot of people with nice cars down there because you would see that in action. That was my experience, and I don't know that I ever heard like the supposition that
Yeah.
people got some sort of federal aid or something, but I'm wondering if that could be something that people locked onto.
S- Again, okay, so this is an answer to your original question again, like what are some things you'd want people to know? Um, each tribe's casino enterprise is independently run, so that the individual tribe runs their casino and decides how they're going to allocate casino revenues. And so one tribe might decide they're going to provide payments to tribal members, that whatever money they make from the casino, they're just going to cut checks to tribal members, and those are called per capita payments. Per caps is like the short term that's used for those. um my tribe has made a decision that doesn't want to focus on per caps, and so like we get revenue from the casino usually twice a year, and the check amount is like, one check will be like $600, and then the other check will be like $900. So in a year's time, as a tribal member, I get $1,500 from the casino revenue. Um, and instead, what we've invested our money in that we make from the casino is higher education, scholarships for tribal members, uh, electricity, paying utilities for our tribal elders, who helping them heat their homes during the winter or cool their homes during the summer. Um, Investing in economic enterprises for the tribes so that it'll be more sustainable, tribal housing, so that we can build homes, affordable homes for our tribal members, etc. So it really depends on the tribe and how they decide to use their revenue and to share that among tribal members. And in some tribes, there might be more payouts to tribal members, so they're getting bigger checks. But then in other tribes like mine, like we're not seeing those direct benefits in our pockets. We're seeing them more through tribal services.
Yeah, and it sounds like there are people out there who, I'm learning so much, so it's important for people to understand that and kind of look under the hood a little bit.
Sure.
So, yeah, that all
Hmm.
snaps together. Okay, cool. So, is that the sort of thing that you focus on? I mean, people's prejudices or presuppositions about native people in general. Is that something you really drill on your courses or in your writing, or what's the focus? What do you share with the world in terms of those endeavors?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on audience. I mean, you always have to consider your audience. So if I'm teaching a course that is to Native American studies majors who are upper class, like in like juniors, seniors, their knowledge base is going to be more substantial, and so there will be less sort of like basic explanation going on in those types of classes, and we can really focus in on specifics, on even like theories behind Native American studies as a field. If it's a more, like 100 level course where I'm getting people who might not have ever had any exposure to these issues or to this history, then yeah, I'm going to have to do some basic explaining and explain, like where the status of Native American tribes today originates,
Right.
what that history is, the long history of dispossession, colonialism, these concepts that people might not be super familiar with, like how does colonialism work? Or there's a theory within Native American indigenous studies called settler colonialism, and that's the idea that
Right.
not only do you colonize a place and use its resources, but you settlers do a lot of the work, and through a process of settlement, westward expansion, where settlers move into native lands, they displace and try to erase the native peoples and then take advantage of those resources. I mean, that's like the very most basic explanation of what this is. um, and so if I'm teaching a basic, 100 level course or people who don't have a lot of experience, then I'm going to have to do a lot of that explaining of those basic ideas and that basic history. What I don't do is go into my course and like insult people for not knowing, or for not having this exposure, because not everybody grew up near a reservation or grew up knowing somebody who was a tribal citizen and sort of having certain things explained to them. And so, like, I'm cool. Meet me where you're at, and I'll help bring you along, and we'll try to come to a better understanding of this.
And that makes all the sense in the world too. You know, just thinking from my own perspective, growing up in one place where had a lot more contact with, would meet people who were native, it was just a culture that was around a lot more. Living on the East Coast, it's very different. And I know that
Yeah,
not
for sure.
everyone has even, um, like if you grew up in this part of the country, you probably had never been to a powwow or like gone to a casino, or like a native run casino or something. It's not around as much. So
Right.
I could totally see that as well. You might not,
Yep.
might not be so familiar with any native culture. So I get that. What when it comes to skating,
But
like,
hold
yeah,
on.
yeah,
So where
oh
I
yeah,
come
yeah,
in though,
yeah.
where I come in that scenario is there's a reason that you may have never met a native person or never gone to a powwow or never been to a reservation.
I mean,
And
is it just
that's where I
is
come in
it
and explain,
sure?
like,
Yeah,
well, there's a long history of dispossession that happened through colonial wars, through treaties, through land grabs. That's the reason. And so, I try to help people to understand that as well. If somebody's like, well, I'm from, like, I'm from whatever place and we don't have any tribes nearby. And it's like, yes, you did.
you did.
And you probably do still have native descendants nearby. And let me explain why. Let me explain the processes that made that a historical reality. And so that's kind of what I see as part of my responsibility.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets back
Anyway, back to
into
skating.
yeah, back to skating. No, it gets into that like storyteller role that you were talking about earlier, story listener,
Yeah.
storyteller. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
that
For
all
sure.
snaps together. Then when it comes to skating, I mean, do you see a role for yourself in educating people through skating? People that you meet, people that are, you know, just a friend or somebody who is in the community. I know that you do a lot with Slow Impact, which is, if you're listening to this pod, it's coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Where does your role in educating people about native culture, native traditions, like you're talking about, dispossession, things like that? Where does that come in within skating?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that's something that I'm still kind of in the process of figuring out. Uh, because I'm not like a skate academic in the sense that my academic work and my skateboarding cross over each other a lot. They haven't, like I've never published an academic piece of writing on skateboarding. And so, but I have done, like the first Slow Impact, we did a panel on Native American skateboarding. Um, we've had, Native American dances and other, people come and speak to Slow Impact as a gathering. And we try to include programming as well, like whether it's papers or panels that bring an indigenous perspective, because we think that's important. That's Native people are skaters too. There's actually a lot of native skaters out there. It's one of those things that's
For sure.
popular and growing on reservations for sure.
Which is so cool. But I know what you mean
So,
too, like in terms of just like the clarification that you made earlier, there are skate academics, Ocean Howell comes to mind, who like their academic
yeah,
work where they talk about urban planning or public infrastructure and stuff like that, that ties into skateboarding in a very intimate way. What you're talking about is, there are places where they overlap. Absolutely. You're talking about native people ride skateboards just like the rest of us. They're not as intertwined in that way though.
yeah, yeah, sure. Um, and I mean, that's something that I've been thinking about in the future. Will I want to like dabble with skate academic writing? I haven't done that so much yet. My involvement has mostly been with sort of like public presentations and being part of gatherings like Slow
Yeah.
Impact or
Yeah.
others. Like I've hosted or chaired panels at conferences or at museums. Like Phoenix Art Museum had the guys from the and men and women from Apache Skateboards, for example, and I was like sort of the moderator of a panel, but I was asking them questions, and they were the ones doing the talking, not me. Um, and at academic conferences, I've brought in skateboarding some. Actually, one of your previous guests, Silas Baxter Neal, was supposed to be on a panel that I put together
No, no way.
at a conference a few years ago. Yeah, but it was during COVID and it didn't work out,
Yeah,
and
I
like
get
he
that.
wasn't able to make it just because travel was kind of crazy, and it didn't happen. But um I think that let me put it this way. Even if I'm not like a skate academic, I think that my academic work and even my background as a native person, like they only enrich like what I do as a skateboarder. I think that the ethos of a skateboarder, or at least the ethos that I grew up with, which was sort of like being an outsider, sort of like succeeding in spite of whatever obstacles were
Yeah.
around. If there wasn't infrastructure, building your own infrastructure, doing all those things. I mean, those are things that I find um, easy parallels within my own background as a native person, because I grew up in these communities where like there aren't a lot of resources, and there are a lot of outside forces sort of arrayed, or a lot of challenges that we have to overcome, and I think that's like the crossover with skateboarding is pretty easy and can be pretty apparent if you point those out. um, and so I think that it informs a lot of what I do, like this, the persistence you talk about, that like with skateboarding. In what other thing do you do where you like slam 1,000 times to do one thing for 5 seconds? And and sort of like as an academic, it's the same. Like how you engage in this process of like writing and agonizing over a piece of work that you just want it to say like just right the way you're trying to say something. You're trying to distill this complex idea down into a form that will be legible, that will hit people, that will make the point that you're trying to make. I mean, there are just easy parallels with skateboarding. And so I think that it has informed a lot of what I do as an academic in so many ways, probably like consciously and subconsciously, for sure.
That's beautifully put. And also, if you ever need a reason to believe that you can do something, just go back to a trick that you worked on and think about how
Yeah.
frustrated and depressed you were when you were trying to figure it out, and then how awesome it was when you actually did it. So I that is a fantastic
Right, right.
parallel.
Absolutely.
Well, okay, speaking of what you grew up around, speaking of your perspective, I was going to see if you want to play a little game. called This or That, where we get your picks. We get your
This or that.
This or
Okay.
That, where we get your takes on your preferences. So I'm going to share my screen and let's
Okay.
do this. Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions and you just tell me what you like and why, what you like and what you don't like and why. Sound good?
Oh boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, the first one, Phoenix or
So I got to look
Tucson?
at these two and
It's Phoenix or Tucson. Which one do you
oh
prefer
man.
and why?
Uh Tucson. Tucson Tucson has more like flavor, I think. It has more culture. Like Phoenix is your like such your stereotypical sort of desert sprawl, um, snowbird type of place, whereas Tucson has like a long-standing kind of culture. There's like a Mexican American culture. There are more sort of like murals and more of a feel of a college town. I like Tucson for sure. I'll take Tucson over Phoenix.
Yeah, it seems a little bit more, I don't know, small townish versus yeah, the sprawl, the absolute freeway that is Phoenix. So
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Arizona or
exactly.
Arizona or New Hampshire?
Oh, Arizona. Yeah, no brainer. Arizona, 100%.
Easy
I'll take
one
desert.
for
I mean,
you.
like New Hampshire's beautiful. The lakes, the rivers, the leaves. You know, you get fall leaves. All that stuff is awesome. But the desert's in my blood, man, for sure. Like, I'll take Arizona
E-
any day over
Easy
anywhere, really.
easy pick for you, and I kind of figured that's what you were gonna pick, but have to ask.
Yeah,
All right,
good
half
to
cab or
try.
dunk, half cab or dunk.
Oh man. Yeah, half cab without question. I mean, I don't skate either of them, but and I have skated both. I don't like skate either now, but yeah, I'll take a half cab. I think it's just a more classic uh like like if I think of the skate shoe that looks the coolest that some of the best stuff has been done in, like I'll think of a half cab probably sooner than dunk. Um, no, you know, no shade on dunks. They're fine. I definitely wouldn't skate a panda dunk, that's for sure. But I'll take a I'll take a half cab over a dunk. Yeah.
I maybe intentionally picked that one, but got it. All right, half cab or airwalk.
Oh man. Um, Probably an airwalk, like an OG, an airwalk, a gym or a one or a Jason Lee airwalk. Or you know like again, I'm a big pan small wheels person, and half cabs were around, although full cabs were more common and people would like cut them off. I had I mean, I had airwalk NTSs, the Jovante shoe, those yellow
Whoa,
ones that he
yeah,
wore, and like he looked sick. I had a different colorway. I had like the kind of like slate blue. It was like a bluish turquoise color. I had those,
nice.
and then I had a pair of like green, cream, and black Airwalk ones that were sick. But I'd take classic Airwalk over a half cab. Yeah.
There we go. Picked it. Half pipe, mini ramp, I should say. Mini ramp or flat ground.
Oh, mini ramp, man. Yeah, I'll take a mini ramp. I mean, my flat ground game is weak, and I like transitions. Even more lately, I've gotten a little more into transitions. Yeah, I'll take a mini ramp just because like you don't have to push as much. It's not you gotta like it's repetitive to learn tricks, but in a different way than flat ground. Like flat ground is just like so frustrating to try and flip your board. I just remember like in those early days trying to learn pressure flips and just like watching your
Yeah,
tail razor down to like nothing after scraping it so many times. Like I even then I knew like flat ground is not going to be my thing. I'm not going to have good, you know, like board control or ability to flip my board. So I'll take a mini ramp over flat ground.
so you picked mini ramp,
Not that I won't do it. If the homies want to go skate flat ground, like I'll go do it. It's all good. I'll skate
even
anywhere.
especially I was gonna say perfect flat ground at Borough Hall in Brooklyn. You know, if you end up there, you're probably gonna have a good
A
time. All right,
perfect mini ramp versus perfect flag route. I'll take the perfect mini ramp still.
bold choice, but I like it. All right, World Industries or New Deal?
Um, Geez. So you got the Arizona OG there. You got Randy Colvin. It at its time, I was a New Deal kid for sure. So I would take a New Deal. I had a New Deal Rick Ibiseta board. I had I had a lot of New Deal stuff in that era. So we I don't know, maybe it's regional. Like, but among my skate group, New Deal was more common than World Industries was in early 90s. So yeah, I'd take New Deal. Um yeah, like Rick Ibiseta, Andy Howell, um, like Justin Gerard, like OG New Deal, old New Deal was just sick. I just thought it was sick. So many
Yeah,
rad
yeah.
dudes. Uh, yeah, John Montesi. I'm trying to think of who was the other guy. Guy who did a heel flip front board in the Children of the Sun video. It was super good. What was that dude's name?
Who's on New Deal? The like New Deal
Another
names, like
old New Deal.
the New Deal names that come to mind. Was the dude Armando Barajas? Was he on New Deal?
Yeah, Armando Bra. He was. So was Julio De La Cruz was on there.
Whoa, yeah,
Um,
before Neighborhood. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he was a New Deal guy. He skated the Chariots of Fire, like doing triple flips on his board. It was like bouncing off the ground, like crazy tech stuff.
So sick.
Um, yeah, no, I was into New Deal. Again, no shade on World because World's sick at that. I mean, at that time,
Yeah.
World was awesome, super
Uh,
influential. But I was a New Deal guy. Ed Templeton, Mike
Right.
Vallely
Right.
back
Right. Right.
then, and then after New Deal, when Ed and Mike started television, TV, like
Right.
I was
TV.
super into
Yeah.
that. Like we followed TV television from New Deal, and I had an Ed Templeton television board that was sick. That famous one with sort of like the big mouth. Um, it's hard to explain. It's like kind of this red shade with
I think I know the one
this
you're
is like
talking
a really
about.
iconic looking board.
Yeah, and like such a moment in
I had
time
that Ed
because
Templeton board.
so sick. All right, so
Yeah,
you have your choices. You're a New Deal guy. Questionable or Tim and Henry's?
yeah. Oh man. Uh Geez, that's hard. Um Man, that's way too hard to decide. The
So it
questionable
makes it a
video
good
or
question.
Tim and Henry. Yeah, that's like which of your children would you choose to
Yeah,
save or
right.
whatever? God. Oh, I'm probably gonna say Tim and Henry. Uh I mean, I've always been a guy, if you can say, if you could say that. It sounds kind of funny, but um, like yeah, dude, that's so hard. Geez, yeah, I'll just say Tim and Henry. Tim and Henry. Yeah, I think Tim Gavin is like super slept on. I think that he doesn't get his due sort of in the history of that era. And if you go back and watch that part, like Tim Gavin's sick. And we all know the story of how he's like, well, I couldn't skate switch, and so I had to like quit
Right.
basically
Right.
from that when skating went switch. But like Tim Gavin was super sick, and he's an Arizona guy, so you got to pull for another Arizona head. Um, yeah, and just like the the short friends sections, like although they're both good, like dude, that's just too hard. But just because I got to choose one, I'll say Tim and Henry.
You've got your picks. Pet tortoise or pet snake?
795. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, right. The price. Pet
Tortoise,
tortoise.
man.
Tortoise.
Tortoise, 100%. Who wants?
What? You're so
Yeah, I'll take the
definitive. You're so
tortoise
decisive.
over.
Okay.
Who wants a snake?
Some
Yeah,
people want snakes, but all right,
yeah.
tortoise works. Desert animal, that makes sense. ASU or
Yeah.
University of Arizona? Which one?
Um, That's like the Tucson versus Arizona thing, or Tucson versus Phoenix thing.
Right.
Uh, I attended U of A, and so maybe I have a little bit of like school spirit in that way. And then ASU
Interesting.
is my employer, and they treat me fairly well. Like my grandfather went to ASU on the GI Bill after
Yeah.
World
Wow.
War II, so I have like sort of a deep family connection there. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll take either, whatever. But
Cool.
because I actually attended U of A, I could say like, okay, I attended U of A, so maybe
Right.
there. But yeah, ASU I never attended as a student, so whatever.
All right. Last one. PhD, or you're the guy who ollied the water tower gap. It's not Jeremy Ray. It's Maurice Crandall. Which one would you pick?
Jeremy Ray.
Yeah, yeah. Which one would you pick? Having a PhD, or being the guy who ollied the water tower gap?
Yeah, I mean, Skate Glory is great, and nobody's ever gonna forget the guy that watered the or that ollied the water tower gap, or you know, it's called the Gons because he did the Gons.
Yeah,
But how many stories have we heard of like pro skaters who had their moment of shine and then like their lives haven't panned out super well since then? So
very valid.
I would say having a PhD has provided me with a lot of life experience and fulfillment and employment, and like avenues for relationships and traveling and all that stuff that I could never have gotten through skateboarding because I'm just not that good of a skater. So yeah, I've been able to do maybe some of the things that good skaters get to do, like travel and meet people and have different experiences. Like a PhD has opened that door for me. So I'd say PhD.
There we go. You've got your answers. Beautifully put. Okay, man. That's it. I gotta wrap up. But is there anything else you want the world to know?
Sure. No, just I mean, come to Slow Impact. It's going to be another good one. We got some. We can't announce some of the things we've got planned, but there's some. Hopefully, it all pans out. There's going to be some sick info dropping soon.
Love to hear it. Everybody stay posted because it's gonna be special this year. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, man, cool. Thank you.